This training is presented by the California Student Aid Commission. Welcome to our Middle Class Scholarship 2.0 training module series. This is Module 1, Award Determination. This module will cover the following MCS topics: eligibility requirements, award determination, programs included in the calculation, award examples, and helpful resources. First, let's take a look at the eligibility requirements for MCS 2.0. To be considered for an MCS 2.0 award, students must submit their FAFSA or CADA by the priority deadline every year. Unlike Cal Grant renewals, students must reapply every year by the priority deadline to be reconsidered for an MCS renewal award. Typically, the priority deadline is March 2nd every year. However, the deadline was extended to July 2nd, 2024 for the 24-25 aid year only. Students must also be attending a UC, a CSU, or enrolled in a bachelor's program at a California community college. The student may not be in default on a federal student loan, must be pursuing their first undergraduate degree or teaching credential, cannot be incarcerated, must be a California resident, and a U.S. citizen, eligible non-citizen, or a qualified immigrant who meets AB 540 status requirements. The student must also maintain satisfactory academic progress and be enrolled at least half-time to receive an MCS award. Similar to the Cal Grant program, MCS also has its own income and asset ceilings that are adjusted every year to account for the cost of living. MCS eligibility is based on the total income and the net worth from the ICER file. For dependent students, only the parent's total income and net worth are considered. For independent students, only the total income and net worth of the student and spouse, if married, are considered. Students may receive middle class scholarship for up to 4 years of full-time attendance. Similar to the Pell and Cal Grant programs, MCS lifetime eligibility is calculated as a percentage. For example, 4 years of eligibility is calculated as 400%. A student's lifetime eligibility is determined on their education level, or EL, at the time of their very first MCS payment. For example, if a student is reported as a third-year junior during their initial MCS award year, that student will receive 2 years or 200% of lifetime MCS eligibility. Education level is determined by the school based on their own institutional policy and is reported through the MCS enrollment file or through a correction. Next, we will examine MCS award determination and the use of enrollment files. Award consideration for the middle class scholarship begins with the submission of enrollment records from campuses. CSAC uses this enrollment data to determine both a student's MCS eligibility and the award amount. Initial enrollment files are typically uploaded by institutions just ahead of the fall term in July or August. Enrollment files are processed weekly on Friday nights throughout the academic year. Schools should submit enrollment records for all students who should be considered for an MCS award. If the student who is initially withdrawn or financially ineligible becomes eligible again, needs a new enrollment record submitted. This student's enrollment data can be submitted manually or via batch upload. For more information about MCS enrollment files, check out our next MCS training module. As previously mentioned, the submission of enrollment files is required for student award consideration. It is the first step in the MCS awarding process. There are 2 options for schools to submit enrollment data to CSAC. First is manually via web grants on the student enrollment data screen. This is a good option for schools with a very small MCS eligible population. The other option is in batches through the upload of enrollment files. Schools should use the enrollment file layout to format their data before uploading to web grants. We discussed this topic in greater detail in our second MCS training module. Here is a look at the MCS award consideration timeline. Initial enrollment files are typically uploaded by institutions just ahead of the fall term in July or August. CSAC will announce the opening of the enrollment file submission process in a grant operations memo. Once all schools have submitted their initial enrollment files, CSAC will temporarily close file submission to run the initial awarding process. Once initial awards have been run, CSAC will open the payment and correction process for that award year. Schools should continue submitting enrollment data for students not previously submitted or students who had been determined ineligible but now need to be re-evaluated. Subsequent enrollment files submitted by the close of business on Friday will be processed over the weekend. Determining the MCS award amount begins with the difference between the student's cost of attendance and the sum of the following items. First, the student's total federal and state aid, institutional aid, scholarships, and fee waivers. Next, the student's total private scholarships and emergency aid that are in excess of items 3 and 4. Third, we will use a fixed amount reflecting the expected student contribution, or SC. For 23-24, the fixed student contribution amount was $78.98. For 24-25, the student contribution amount will increase to $81.54. Finally, the formula will include 33% of the parent contribution, or PC, that is derived from the adjusted available income on the student's ISER. This fourth item is considered only for dependent students whose parents' total income is greater than $100,000. To determine a student's MCS award amount, the Commission uses the following formula. First, we take the student's cost of attendance as reported by the school. Then, we subtract the sum of the student's other aid, the excess portion of private scholarships and emergency funds, the student contribution, and 33% of parent contribution if the parent's total income is over $100,000. That value is then multiplied by the phase-in factor, which is determined by CSAC based on available funding and other factors. The phase-in factor for the 23-24 award year was 36% and has been proposed to be somewhere between 36 and 38% for the 24-25 award year. This is the basic formula that will determine the student's MCS award. Now that we have covered the basic MCS awarding formula, let's take a deep dive into which financial aid programs are included in the award calculation. Federal awards that must be reported include the Federal Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, the Teach Grant, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Award, the Iraq Service Grant, and the AmeriCorps Education Award. The next category is institutional aid and fee waivers. Programs to include are institutional grants, athletic scholarships, fee waivers such as the CalVet fee waiver, the Education Opportunity Program, institutionally administered scholarships, including internship payments counted as other financial assistance, the Student Success Completion Grant, AB 19 Books and Grants Funds, and TRIO Student Support Services grants. Another category is state awards. Programs that must be included in the MCS calculation are the Child Development Grant, the Law Enforcement Personnel Dependents Grant Program, the California Military Department GI Bill Award Program, the California Volunteers College Corps Education Award, if not used for the repayment of student loans, and the Golden State Teacher Grant. Now, the good news is the Chafee grant is no longer considered other financial assistance beginning in the 24-25 award year, which means that it should now be excluded from the MCS calculation as well. So when schools upload their enrollment files or make corrections to the student record, Chafee grant should no longer be included in the state award field. Cal Grant is also included in the MCS award calculation. Prior to 24-25, the Cal Grant award amount was either obtained from the Cal Grant roster or reported by the school in the state aid field. Beginning in the 24-25 award year, schools can report Cal Grant amounts in a separate Cal Grant specific field. This includes field number 21 of the enrollment file, which should be based on the student status from field number 9 of the enrollment file. For example, a fall-only Cal Grant amount should be reported when a student is reported as a fall term-only student. On the payment roster file, schools report the annual Cal Grant amount as well as the term amount in fields number 66 through 69. Schools can also report the Cal Grant amount directly in Web Grants on the MCS display roster page. Schools should also report the total amount of private scholarships and emergency aid for MCS award calculation purposes. Examples of emergency funds include those for housing, other basic needs, and assistance awarded by an institution-based foster youth program. Even though the MCS awarding formula includes only the excess portion of these sources, schools should report the full amounts. CSAC will then calculate the excess portion to be used in the award calculation. The following sources should not be reported as they are not included in the MCS calculation: federal student loans, federal work study, the DREAM Act Service Incentive Grant, or DSIG, the Learning Aligned Employment Program, earnings from an internship or assistantship if treated as employment, federal Veterans Education benefits excluded from OFA, California Volunteers College Corps Living Allowance, and California Department of Rehabilitation funds. Next, we will go through some specific MCS award examples. For the sake of these examples, we used 23-24 amounts for the student contribution and phase and factor values. First, we'll look at a 3-term UC student. The school reported this student's cost of attendance as $36,000. We then deduct their federal aid, institutional aid, state aid, and Cal Grant awards. We also deduct a fixed student contribution amount of $78.98. Please note that the student contribution for 24-25 will increase to $81.54. We also deducted 33% of the parent contribution. This example is a dependent student whose parents' total income is over $100,000. The parent contribution from the ICER was $17,000, and therefore 33% of PC is $56.10, which will also be deducted when doing the MCS award calculation. Now, the school reported that the student received $5,000 total in private scholarships and emergency funds. CSAC determined that $0 would be deducted. This is because the student's private scholarship and emergency funds total did not exceed the sum of the student and parent contribution. The calculation from the previous slide resulted in a final amount of $15,492. However, this amount must be multiplied by the phase-in factor. Please note that the phase-in factor is not applicable for students who have been flagged as a foster youth. When multiplied by the phase-in factor, the student's raw MCS award amount comes out to $5,577.12. That amount is then rounded to the nearest whole dollar using standard rounding. We then divide that number by 6, round one more time, and then multiply by 6. Now you might be wondering why we do this part of the calculation, and it's because we must have an MCS award amount that is divisible by either 2 semesters or 3 quarters. And that way, the student can receive the same award amount whether they attend a semester school or a quarter school. The final MCS award amount for this student is $5,580 with a term award amount of $1,860. Now please note here that the MCS per term award amount may vary. Sometimes students have uneven MCS award amounts across all terms, and that usually happens if either their cost of attendance or their other awards are also unevenly split. For example, if a student were to have limited Pell LEU, that would result in a larger Pell Grant, perhaps in the fall, and a smaller Pell Grant award in the winter or spring. In doing so, that would increase the MCS award amount in winter or spring to make up for the missing Pell Grant. Our second example is a 2-term CSU student. The CSU reported the student's cost of attendance as $28,000. We then deduct their federal aid, institutional aid, state aid, and Cal Grant. We also deduct the student contribution fixed at $78.98. In this example, the student is dependent and their parents' total income is less than $100,000. Therefore, the parent contribution will not be considered in the award calculation. The CSU reported the student received $10,000 total in private scholarships and emergency funds. CSAC determined that the portion included in the calculation would be $2,102, as that is the excess of the total amount above the student contribution amount. The final amount from the previous slide was $6,352. We then multiply that by the phase-in factor of 36% to get a raw MCS award amount of $2,286.72. That amount is rounded to the nearest whole dollar, divided by 6, rounded to the nearest whole dollar once again, and multiplied by 6. That results in a final MCS award amount of $2,286 for a per term award amount of $1,143. Our last example is a 2-term community college student. Please note that the MCS is only available for community college students enrolled in a bachelor's program. This community college reported the student's cost of attendance as $20,000. We then deduct their federal aid, institutional aid, state aid, and Cal Grant, as well as the student contribution. In this example, there is no parent contribution as the student is independent. The school reported that the student received $500 for private scholarships and emergency funds, and CSAC determined that there was a $0 excess. The final amount from the previous slide was $5,954. When multiplied by the phase-in factor of 36%, we get $2,143.44 for the raw MCS award. That amount is then rounded to the nearest whole dollar, divided by 6, rounded once again, and then multiplied by 6. That results in a final MCS award of $2,142 or $1,071 per term. We will conclude this module with some helpful resources. For more middle class scholarship resources, be sure to visit our MCS webpage for schools. There you will find a comprehensive MCS 2.0 handbook, enrollment file layouts, payment roster file layouts, and other output data layouts. Thank you for watching Module 1 of our Middle Class Scholarship 2.0 Training Module Series.